Thank you. Okay. Well, I guess I can settle you down by saying, let's get rid of the Fed. No, everything is going quite well with the Campaign for Liberty, and it was a great victory this week, as everybody knows, that once again, we got it passed in the House to get the Fed audited. I've always said, if we get that outfit audited, the next step will be obvious. We have to get rid of it, so that's what we're working on. You know, I know Ronnie gave his speech, and it was very good and very lighthearted, and he said he would introduce his mother and his wife, and that's very good. But he didn't go into a great deal. He hinted to what was happening last night because we did get together, because we don't see Rand very often. And I know you hear in the media every once in a while, well, when did you talk to Rand? What did you say? What's your strategy? What are you doing? He gets tired of it, and I sort of get tired of it too. So last night, I'm going to reveal some secrets to you, because this is an inside group, and the media all left. There's no media here, I'm sure. And I know nobody will put anything on the internet. So we had our strategy meeting, and we got down to, and Ronnie hinted to what we talked about, and that is, when's the golf game going to be running? And when are you going to arrive for the wedding of Peggy and Ronnie's middle child? What time are you going to be there for the wedding? And they worked that out rather well. So we did have some very, very serious discussions, and of course very important things too about what the family's doing, and that is the truth, that you know, the issues are very, very important to all of us, and yet the family's pretty important to us too, and that's you know, has high priority. But it is always very helpful for me to come to Campaign for Liberty and LPAC, because there are some days when, you know, it's easier to be upbeat than other days. And when I have trouble with, you know, sort of being on the optimistic side, coming to these events are very helpful. And, you know, during the presidential campaign, there was a lot of positive things said, and a lot of young people, you got rid of my apathy, and now I'm going to get involved. And that was always encouraging too. But it was a two-way street. It wasn't just me trying to and getting some people, you know, energized, but it came back the other way, because if there's not a response and we don't have a group and we don't have support, it just doesn't work. But we as a nation today, we have some real serious problems that we here have to deal with, and I think at times they seem overwhelming, and at times they seem to be solvable. Right now, you know, the most important thing is to separate the two, what's going on in Washington and what's going on outside of Washington. And obviously most people think the only thing that really counts is Washington, and I think the only thing that really counts is what's outside of Washington. In Washington, they believe they really run the show, and in many ways they do. They have a lot of power and a lot of clout, and they have the agencies of government, and they can do a great deal of harm. But they don't have much of a grasp about ideas, and ideas are what's important. Ideas move the world, the bad ideas and the good ideas. But right now, the good ideas are overwhelming. The bad ideas, they've had their chance. They've had centuries of opportunity to run roughshod over the people with tyrannical government and fiat money and all the mess. And their failure is giving us a wonderful, opportune time to solve some of these problems. You know, the Audit the Fed bill was very encouraging, and it reflected this whole idea that the people really passed that. When I was there, we talked about it. Of course, I was talking about it since 1976, and we weren't getting very far, and I figured probably never would, but I kept talking about it. And that has changed, not because I finally became an insider. I didn't have much I didn't have much goal of doing that, and besides, I probably wouldn't have been very successful. But anyway, the goal for me was to change people's attitudes about it. Because I wasn't going to work up the ladder and become a chairman, trade the votes, and really be able to get a bill passed with a name on it. You know, they keep saying, Ron, you people like that, you're not successful. You never pass anything. Well, quite frankly, I was trying to repeal everything, not pass stuff. And of course, that went on for a good while, but eventually, you know, persistence paid off, because the strategy for me and for all of us, if we understand this, is to get the people to change their minds. You know, I often refer to Nixon in 1971 when he was giving his speech about going off the gold standard and everybody has to follow Keynes. He says, we're all Keynesians now. And he was right. He was right. They were all Keynesians. All the Republicans and all the Democrats, and quite frankly, the leadership of both parties are still Keynesians. But the secret is you got to get a consensus with the people, and the people will put pressure on their congressman. So we had this delightful vote this week, and it would be great to say that that overwhelming vote, 333 or whatever it was, they all knew exactly what we know. They understood it, and they're for sound money and wanting to get rid of the Fed. Quite frankly, half of them didn't have the vaguest idea what they were voting on. But they knew that it was good politics, and that's the way the system works. That people at home sent them a message and said, vote for it. And that's just what you all did, and the Campaign for Liberty did, was energize the base, and that's why they have done that. And you say, well, we have to wait until they really understand it. No, you'll wait forever, because it takes a certain group of people who are in leadership, who have the intellectual power and authority and ability to influence ideas, and then the rest follows. Governments reflect the people's attitude. And I think this is an example of how it can work. And there are a lot of other challenges. This is just one, and it's a bare step, and it has a long way to go. And some people say, well, it's never going to pass, and put a negative spin on it. But at the same time, it's so different than 30 years ago. You know, nobody even wanted to think about it. I mean, it was like a sacred cow. You didn't even talk about the Federal Reserve. Now, ever since the crash in 2008 and the confirmation that those of us who predicted what would come with the housing bubble and what happened on the NASDAQ bubble, it came, and all of a sudden there was credibility, and people say, what is this story about the Federal Reserve? And fortunately, one other thing happened. It seemed like there was a certain group of people that had a very open mind that surprised me and everybody else. It was young people, college kids on campuses started recognizing this, and they've been leading the charge. So it is a lot of things coming together. Then all of a sudden there's excitement about what is happening. And this is the initial stages, and just wait. There's going to be another financial crisis, let me guarantee you that. And my suspicion is that it's going to be a lot worse than we have, and there's going to be a lot more demand, for reforms, and that's when we'll get down to serious business. But also this week they had another important vote. And that was the continuing resolution. Now, there's a bipartisan, understanding about the Federal Reserve. Although they had to concede so much already, there's a bipartisan support for the Fed leadership will support it regardless of what the party's saying for the moment. But there's a strong bipartisan leadership. That would mean that, you know, if I'd have stayed there 50 years, I'd have never been chairman of the Financial Services Committee. So there's a lot of, you know, a lot of clout there. But in other areas, like the continuing resolution. The continuing resolution is what they do, and they've been doing it for many, many years. When I first went to Congress, they had 13 appropriations bills, and we'd systematically go through them all and have open debate, and it would go back and forth. They don't do any of that more. They don't even pretend to do it anymore. It's just all, dump it all in a basket, and they say, oh, we're going to continue the government at the same rate we have been, just so the government doesn't close down, and nobody wants to close down the government. So they concede that that will happen. But they don't keep it the same. They add on. You know, they put it all together and tell the members, well, this is just a continuation of what we've been doing. We're not raising anything. Oh, except for a few things like a war. We got to get the war going, and we got to give the rubber stamp what Obama wants. Oh, no, we don't like Obama. Yeah, but we love his war, except for one reason. He's not bombing enough people. But nevertheless, you know, it's bipartisan, goes through in the Senate before they even had voted on whether there would be the support on the one amendment to support Obama's expansion of the war. It was agreed. The Senate said, we're going to do it. We're going to pass it, whatever the House does. So it was the bipartisan. And it makes my point that, you know, the two parties are alike. So you cannot depend. I know many people will identify as Republicans, a few will identify as Democrats, and you have to realize, though, I can't believe there would be too many in here that said, oh, you know, if the Republicans take over the Senate this year, that will hamstring the president and everything is going to be okay. That's a joke. So it wouldn't be okay because they all believe in the same thing. They believe in the Federal Reserve, and they believe in the war. They believe in the spending, intervention overseas, and they believe in the American empire. They believe that that we as a nation have a moral obligation to flaunt our power and to flaunt our values and force other people to obey us. And if not, well, we can put on sanctions, and that can be pretty vicious. Oh, that's just that's not serious. Yeah, just children die and things like that. We put on sanctions on Iraq for 10 years. Madeleine Albright did not deny and agreed that 500,000 children died during that episode because we bombed them, bombed their waterworks, denied medicine, denied food, and 500 children, they said, died. And sometimes I wonder about, you know, this concern about the children in this country. There was never any concern about the children in Iraq. And then they wonder why. Then they wonder why they hate us and want to kill us. And they say, oh, it's radical Islam. It's all in their religion. Well, there's some religion involved too, but there's some religion involved on our side too. And so they, you know, they make this point, and we end up, you know, supporting the two parties, and they go and they make these deals, and of course they pass the CR overwhelmingly. Then also there was explanation this week that support for the funding for Obamacare. Oh. Boehner and Harry Reid, I think everybody knows that those two names, they had agreed to be okay. We just go ahead and fund it. We don't want to fight about that anymore. So that's how strong beliefs that they have and the content. So all this argument back and forth, I think it's all fluff and it's all fake. So, but it was important. There's a good reason for them to agree. They got to get home. They got to vote. I mean, and get the votes, and they got to get reelected. They got to get reelected to do good. And this is, they believe this. They believe they would probably on a personal basis say they would agree a lot on what we believe in. But it's overwhelming, we can't do it, we gotta go along with it, and they'll have to vote away. We don't wanna look extreme, and if we're not here, how can we do all this goodness for the country? So they sell their souls and they sell themselves in many ways, monetarily, and I think morally too, because they just give up their beliefs and deceive the people, because a lot of people campaign pretty well, and then when they get there, they compromise pretty well too, and that's where the real problem is. But you know, there's a couple other things that happened this week. One was just the vote that happened yesterday. I was disappointed in the vote in Scotland. Who here would have been glad to see a yes vote on that? Now that would have been very exciting, but it's still exciting, the fact that a lot of people around the world have been thinking about this. And the tragedy that our country went through because there were some that believed that they had the right to leave a unit of government voluntarily. Can you imagine what would have happened at our Constitutional Convention, that if they put a phrase in the Constitution that says, when you sign on, when the states sign on and agree to this Constitution, you absolutely take a position that we will never leave the Union. I don't think they'd have gotten one state to endorse that bill or the Constitution. Now, does that mean that if you take that position, that means you're un-American, you're against it, and you want to tear America apart? No, but it's very important that you have the right to secede, the right to leave if you're unhappy. Because even if you don't leave, those individuals in Washington that want to oppress the people and the states and make it a monolithic, tyrannical government, they will know what the story is. There will be limits, and they will automatically restrain them. So in the last 150 years, there's been no restraints whatsoever, so there's not many rights left, you know, wholly for the people and for the states. So the original intent of having a republic of loose-knit governments coming together, that's long been lost and one of our major problems. Not only do we have to deal with the accumulation of power and tyrannical operations from our federal government, there's a lot up there that still believe that we're supposed to even have bigger government. Can you believe that most of the people in Washington still believe we ought to be in the United Nations? I mean, they still believe that stuff, and yet it's to no benefit, and it's all a gimmick too. Who pays for all this? We're in NATO. Okay, NATO gets together and agree to go and start a war. Well, who is it? It's our kids and our money. And we control those units as well, but it's an economic powerhouse that we are obligated to pay for through our taxes. So I would say the best thing is to think in terms of what the people of Scotland tried to do. The smaller the units of government, the better, and self-determination should be respected. 100 years ago, just about 100 years ago, we had a president that thought we should make the world safe for democracy. I think we should make the world safe for liberty, not democracy. So Woodrow Wilson drags us into the war, and one of his big pitches was self-determination. We're going to win this war, and he desperately gets involved in World War I before it closed out. He was terrified that they didn't end the war before he got in there and killed some people himself. So then he gets in and participates in this redrawing of the lines in the Middle East that we're still fighting over. And now, of course, there's a challenge to the lines drawn as far back as Woodrow Wilson in World War I. They were artificial then, they're artificial now, and they're going to be redrawn because we live in a new age, in a positive way, a new age because things are changing. And this is an opening salvo on what is occurring in Scotland. And that is, the people are saying enough is enough, we want to be on our own. And quite frankly, there have been some articles, and I wouldn't ever deal with anything conspiratorial, but I do wonder just how straightforward that election was in Scotland. Because there was a lot at stake there. There was oil at stake and images and what if this gets out of control? What if somebody else wants to do the same thing? What about Caledonia? They might want to secede from Spain. And what about Quebec? They've been talking about it too, and they have a different language. Why wouldn't they be encouraged? And why wouldn't somebody come along and say, well, you know, maybe that's the solution for Ukraine. Maybe we shouldn't be fighting and killing and supporting, you know, one faction over another and getting rid of one leader who's been elected in order to stir this pot. Maybe we say, well, maybe the Russian-speaking Eastern Ukraine should just separate from the Western European Ukraine. That sounds to me like a pretty good solution. You know, Tibet would like to leave China, and China right now, I don't know how strong they will remain economically and what they can do, but Tibet has wanted to leave China for a long, long time. And there's another group of people who have suffered, especially since World War I, and those are the Kurds. Does anybody know where Kurdistan is? Nobody knows where it is because there isn't any. But there should be. They're Kurdish people, and they identify with themselves. And they're all thinking about it, and they're not going to stop thinking about it just because of what happened yesterday in Scotland. And I think this is very, very healthy. I think what we're witnessing now is the failure of a system of government that has been with us for not just 100 years, but hundreds of years, where they believe that the individual was not deserving of respect and rights, and that governments were always to be tyrannical. And you know, they say that when we talk about liberty and talk about some of the fundamental liberties of our Constitution, oh, you guys want to go back to the Dark Ages. Well, no, I'll tell you what is in the Dark Ages. That's tyranny, dictators, pharaohs and kings and all these. That is what's in the Dark Ages, and that's been around too long. And there's no reason in the world to assume that history can't evolve in a sense of changing this and not saying, okay, we've tried it, but we have to go back. Tyranny is the only answer. I actually believe, and of course it will be a while before anybody will know whether I'm even moving in the right direction, but I actually believe that the human race can change. They can evolve. You say, oh no, wars and rumors of war and people are going to kill and there's always going to be violence, which I happen to agree. But there will be a big difference if the violence is done in a local manner, one-on-one or small little groups, compared to allowing the people who promote violence and the force of government to dictate to people, to allow them to get into government. That's where the problem is, you know, allowing these people to run the government. But we've witnessed now in the 20th century, you know, the failure of the government that we know best in this country. You take the results of World War I, and which of course led to World War II. The 20th century was an utter tragedy, and yet we were just benefiting by the Industrial Revolution, which changed all the history of mankind. You think in the last couple hundred years, probably there was the development of about 95% of all great technology just in this very short period of time. But what has happened in these 200 years? Technology has been used by the government to kill people. And that's what's wrong, is the government has too much control of using this technology. What if technology all of a sudden was taken away from the people who want to promote war and given to people, individuals who have small units of government who can communicate outside the government through the internet and spread the message of liberty in that manner? And I think we're starting to see that. Technology is on our side. Yes, there's a lot of technology and still a lot of clout in government, and it will be. But I don't foresee wars coming about like World War I and World War II. I don't think that's on the horizon. That doesn't mean there's not going to be a lot of killing. There's a lot still going on. But you know, it's outside of government. And that can be bad, it can be good though. But right now we have smaller units of government. Right now, you know, we have all these governments in the Middle East, and we have NATO. In the Middle East there are millions of people, maybe 30 million, 40 million people, and all the governments around there who despise ISIS, you know, the Islamic State. They object to it. And you know, nobody knows how many people. They can't even name the people who run ISIS. And they claim, well, a couple months ago, it didn't even exist. Nobody knew about it. Then all of a sudden, a couple thousand people invaded and took over a town. And then there was 10,000, then 20,000. Now, who knows, 20,000, 30,000. The states over there, the governments are so inept, if they don't like them, they can't even handle this. And so it's the failure of the state. But I'll tell you what, there will be a resistance to it if the people are allowed. There's something wrong when you have militants like that and the so-called protectors of the people and the protectors of these countries. They can't even handle this. And well, they said, well, they have too many weapons. Where in thunder did they get the weapons? From you. You know, I thought it was rather ironic a couple of weeks ago when the city of Amerly was being attacked, and they figure, oh, we have to stop this band of wild people taking over, you know, this land. This is the land that the Kurds should have. So we decided, our government decided, well, we have to at least have some bombing up there to make sure they don't take over another town. So they listed an order of priority of what we had to do. And the first order of priority was for our bombers to go up and destroy all the American weapons. Because they had our weapons. Where did they get them? They got them from Syria. Why are they? We sent them there. Oh yeah, we were helping the rebels. And but they were the moderates. You know, the moderate rebels in Syria were the ones who, you know, did deals with the radicals who became the Islamic State. And they, well, wasn't there some atrocious killings? Yeah, probably on both sides. And what about the atrocious killings and the 20 people in the last month that were beheaded in Saudi Arabia? They didn't talk about that. And they don't talk about Sharia law with our bosom buddy friends in Saudi Arabia. But no, I mean, this horror was happening up there. So they were the people we were supporting, but they were the moderates. And what are we doing now? You know, this whole thing started in many ways by our government deciding, get rid of Assad, he's a bad guy. Well, he's been around for a good while, and I don't think I'd vote for him, but but we all of a sudden get rid of Assad, get rid of Assad. Now Assad, if we'd have let him be alone, what if we had allowed Saddam Hussein alone? You know, he didn't like, you know, Al-Qaeda. They weren't there. So all of a sudden we get rid of them when we create a new government that, you know, as soon as they were attacked by these 20,000 hooligans, the people, we spent billions and billions of dollars on training, getting them all these weapons, so they dropped their weapons and ran. And they call that success. Oh no, it's not quite successful. We have to start all over again. Let's go back to bombing, and then we're going to do what McCain says, send them more weapons. There's only one group of people who sat back and said, you know what, that is a great idea. And those are the guys that run our military industrial complex, so let's deny them their money. So what's wrong with an idea whose time has come? The idea that we have a foreign policy based on the golden rule. And don't do anything to anybody else that we don't want them to do to us. Wouldn't that solve a lot of problems? But we will have the battles going on, but the point I was trying to make is that a lot of it is outside of government already. I mean, you have Hamas, we helped start Hamas, and then we said, okay, I think you should be Democrats, you should have a democratic election, so they did. But then we didn't like who they elected, so we had to turn on them. So then they had an election in Lebanon. They had Hezbollah. Hezbollah gets elected. Oh, we don't like them. And on and on. So often, how long did we support the dictator of Egypt? For decades, tens of billions of dollars. Then we decide we don't like Mubarak. So we kick him out, and we say, well, okay, have an election. So they elect somebody that belonged to the Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood. Oh, we don't like them. We got to get rid of him. So we go get rid of him and put in the military dictator again. When are we going to wake up as an American people and say, it's not working, it's stupid, it doesn't help us, it's bankrupting us, and it puts us in more danger, and we ought to quit? Okay, I think I got my point across about foreign policy. And some people would like to say, oh, you're just an isolationist. Well, I think we have accomplished a little bit on that. It's not, and a lot of people, except your real enemies, will say, oh, it's isolation. No, it's non-intervention, because a true believer is a Jeffersonian who wants to have friends with all countries, have trade with all countries, and not get in entangling alliances. And that means you want to travel, trade, and be friends with people. And all of a sudden, that doesn't sound like you're having barbed wire fences up and isolating yourself. No, it's a much different thing. So eventually people should realize this, and I think that it will happen. It's just how much pain and suffering do we have to go through. But as far as isolationism goes, it's far from that. Because under those circumstances, you'd have an international currency, which would be voluntary, market-oriented. It would be a gold standard and not a paper standard run by all the central banks. They wouldn't be in the business anymore. But just as the foreign policy is failure, we'll have to have a new foreign policy. But the economics have failed too, and we've seen the worst in the 20th century. We had fascism, the German type, Italian fascism. We had communism. They didn't kill tens of thousands or tens of millions. They killed hundreds of millions of people with this stupid attitude about tyranny and used by governments. At the same time, it was an economic policy that starved people to death, and they used that as a tool. So it has failed, and we have to get to the point where we have enough people to understand, just as we had enough people understand why we need more transparency of the Fed, we need enough people to see the transparency of a free market economy where there's private property and contracts, why that is far superior to any of the economic planning of a government, because that always fails. So I think we will have to see the day that Keynesianism is ended and there is a substitute and there is advancement. As I talk about advancement of technology, there's an advancement in economic understanding as well. I mean, we're not locked into going back to Adam Smith. Adam Smith was great in his time and gave us some great ideas, but he still was not part of the free market Austrian economic school that has well advanced in the monetary understanding, monetary system, understanding the subjective theory of value, and the understanding of how the market really works. So we don't have to go back. And this was not understood. This is a 20th century phenomenon, that the education, the understanding has occurred, and the errors of the 20th century all occurred because of the fallacies prior to that. And so much of this is so recent. When you just think of the development of the understanding of economics and the foolhardiness of the foreign policy, but this is just recent that in recent history, and this is why I can be optimistic about the changes available. There was a big difference between what I tried to do in the 70s and 80s, because I a lot of times go to college campuses and we get good crowds out at college campuses, and I'm delighted to do that. And there's such enthusiasm, you know, for Austrian economics. I can remember the one time, I think it was in 2007 during the campaign, and I was at the University of Michigan, a liberal school, and they started shouting, "Get rid of the Fed, end the Fed," and they were burning Federal Reserve notes and the whole works. And where was this coming from? It didn't come from me. The ideas are out there. Organizations like the Mises Institute and others campaign for liberty more in a political sense, but the issues are out there. There was only one group that I knew about that I could depend on in the 50s, in the early 60s to get information, because I was starved to try to understand this, and it was the Foundation for Economic Education. Hey, everybody. And it was run by Leonard Reed, and I got to know him very well and had so much respect for him, because he has a lot of good thinking about how to persuade people. And you don't do it by yelling at them. You have to persuade them. And you have this idea that you don't have to, you know, beat them over the head, and you don't have to worry about percentages. This is a great thing. You don't have to say, well, we have to get 51% to pass anything. But like I said, that 51% that voted on the audit bill, they didn't understand it. But you wanted 51% to endorse the ideas. Mises understood this very clearly. Mises also understood the importance of having intellectual leadership. People have to get out. And anybody that comes to a program like this, believe me, you're vulnerable to be in that group. And once you understand this, your obligation is greater, because you're part of a very narrow group that you have to spread this message some way. And it could be, you know, it's been said quite frequently that probably 6, 7, 8% of the colonists really understood what the revolution was all about. But they were able to get the people to support it and win against a powerful government. So this is very, very important. But if you think, oh, how am I going to get 51%? That would be like me standing in Congress and trying to go around and get 51% to agree with me. No, you got to go out and you got to change people's attitudes and ideas, and that, of course, is where we're doing so well and winning. So there's a lot of difference between now and what it was like in the 1950s. Not only have there been a lot more free market libertarian think tanks since that time, even before the internet, but now with the internet and the spreading of information, I mean, we know everything that's going on. And you know, this to me is a tremendous value to all of us, because it used to be so long and slow. So events will move much quicker now, because ideas move much quicker, and the failures are going to be much more blatant. So the failure of the foreign policy has led to this unbelievable chaos and stupidity in the Middle East, where after, you know, we've been over there, I call it a 24-year war. I guess they want to try to challenge the 30-year war and say, well, we've been over there for 30 years. But we went over there in 1990. And it's still going on, you know, and what do they have to offer? Well, let's go bomb them again. What do the Keynesians have to offer? What do they say? We have this economic breakdown, complete disaster, and do they offer free market solutions? No, they say that we had to quadruple. Matter of fact, the monetary base went up 500%, and there's no real recovery, and except for the 1%, the very wealthy. They're doing quite well. But it's failing, and the people know it, and the hostility is going to build. The one thing, though, that I have cautioned so many as I go around and lecture is that the 1%, the super wealthy, you have to be careful. Everybody who is wealthy doesn't deserve to say, well, you're at fault, and if we're going to tax you and punish you because you're successful. If you have a businessman that produces a product, he produces, some type of computer or electronic device, and he didn't get any money from the government and no support from the government, and he did it because he sold you the equipment and made a lot of money, he should be praised for that and not taxed. But if he's part of the military-industrial complex or the banking-industrial complex or, the penal system complex or the media complex where he's in bed with the government, they're in bed with the government, that's a different story. They don't deserve it, and they don't deserve to make the money as the system is being inflated and the bubble's building, and they certainly don't deserve to be bailed out when the whole thing comes apart. I think the greatest hypocrisy of the liberals, especially people like Paul Krugman and Bernanke, their idea, and I think they really believe this, well, the recession has nothing to do with the Fed, and it has to do with people like you quit spending. Well, what if you've lost your job? Or what if you're afraid you're going to lose your job? What if the stock market went down and you lost a lot of money, and so you cut back off? So it's your fault. You didn't spend any money, and they say spend more money, and that's why recessions are caused. People quit spending money. So the theory is just get the government to spend the money in place. If the government spends the money, that will stimulate the economy and the recession will be over. And to some degree, when the recessions are milder in the early part of the destruction of a currency, it sort of works. So it has been working, and we've been totally off the gold standard since '71. So there have been recoveries, but eventually it doesn't work anymore. Used to be under a free market, if you produced $1 worth of debt, you usually got $1 worth of GDP increase. Today, we end up spending, the government and everybody, $10 for $1 worth of GDP. And so what is the solution? It's not working, so they said spend more money. So it's sort of like we didn't solve our problems in Iraq. We were there, send more bombs, send more sanctions, punish more people, kill more people. Economics, they say, well, we've been doing this, we've been manipulating the monetary system, and we had artificial low interest rates, which is a real source of our problem. Well, it didn't work, so we're going to do it a lot more, and they think it's going to change, and it won't. And eventually they'll have to admit it because there will be a rejection of the system, and that, of course, is our job is to be available and understand what the alternative has to be. So if the alternative on foreign policy is to mind our own business and not assume that we are the policemen of the world and quit spending and wasting this money overseas in economics, there are precise answers. Sound money, private property rights, voluntarism, let people go broke when they have a bad deal, and things will work out. But politically right now, that's not going to be available. They're going to keep marching on until they utterly destroy the currency, which who knows when that will come. So these events are very important. They're setting the stage for not only what we have seen in these last several years with a lot more of attention given to monetary policy. Right now, come November, I imagine a lot of you have heard there's going to be a referendum in Switzerland. You know that? A referendum in Switzerland. I think it's November 30th. And Switzerland is a real disappointment. They were the last to go off the gold standard. They always had a sound currency. They stayed out of the United Nations and the IMF, and they were always neutral in war. And the other thing that I really liked about Switzerland is that nobody knows the name of the president. How many people here know the name of the president of Switzerland? And it's not important. They get together, they have these cantons or states, they get together, but they're pretty independent, and they elect a president, and it's a figurehead in a way. So I'm looking for the day for the United States to be so, changed and decentralized that no American will know the name of the president. That would be wonderful. But under today's conditions, I don't want you to forget who the president is. So that is, pretty important on the system. But anyway, Switzerland, in the 1990s, they joined the IMF, and then they sold their gold. They sold 60% of their gold, and they, joined NATO, and and their economy went down. They're having trouble. Now the people there, just like the people who spoke on our audit bill, the people there are speaking out, and they're having a referendum. And they have 3 points to the referendum. They said, that there'll be some backing of the currency with gold, 20%, better than nothing. And then they told the central bank, you can't sell any more of your gold, our gold, the Swiss gold. And they said, yeah, and that gold that's stored over at New York City, we want it to come home, bring their gold home to Switzerland, and that's what should be done. I hope they have a little more guts than the Germans do, because the Germans, indicated bring the gold home, because they're starting to question the trustworthiness of the United States. So they asked for it, Merkel asked for it, and the answer came back, yeah, we're going to give you your gold, but it's going to take about 7 years. We got to find it first. Now, nobody knows exactly why that is. My guess is it's been committed someplace. Why wouldn't they do that? And I think, and this is just my suspicion, is that she backed off mainly because she was probably told, if you push us and we can't literally give you the physical gold back, boy, that could disrupt everything. That could let the people know what's really going on, and we don't want that to happen. That's going to hurt the world economy. It's going to hurt your economy. You're already weak. So it was sort of a blackmail. Don't push us, because we really don't have the gold. But these are grassroots movements. It was Germany, it's Switzerland, and of course Scotland. So people are rising up against the government. But this. The fact that this has been going on for so long, it seems like it's overwhelming, but it really isn't. There's going to be some things come our way. We have I want to read a quote from somebody here. It has to do with foreign policy, and we have to refute this statement. But I want to refute a lot of statements, our foreign policy and the monetary policy and all these things. We have to intellectually, contest them and not just say you're wrong. We have to refute it and tell them why you should have a gold standard and why you shouldn't have a paper standard. But I'll tell you, and a lot of you probably have heard this quote before and know where it came from, but I'll tell you who said this afterwards, but I want to read it now, and with the idea that I want to refute this. It says, naturally, the common people don't want war, neither in Russia, nor in England, nor for that matter in Germany or United States. That is understood. But after all, it is the leaders. It's the leaders of the country who determine the policy, and it's always a simple matter to drag the people along, whether it's in a democracy, or a fascist dictatorship, or a parliament, or a communist dictatorship. It's always the same. Voice or no voice, the people can be always brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked, and you have to tell them and being attacked and denounce the peacemakers for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in every country. Now, I changed one word in there, but otherwise it's literal. And it comes from somebody that doesn't exactly have a very good reputation, but it seems like he hit the nail on the head. This comes from Hermann Göring. Göring said this shortly before he took poison and killed himself at the Nuremberg trials, but he was interviewed, and this is what he said, and he was in charge of this propaganda. And I think people like this, I don't think they're dumb, they're just evil. And And I think there's a tendency for some of these individuals like that to tell the truth. I believe he's telling the truth here as he sees it. And I think that you can apply some of that argument to bin Laden because, you know, we see him as an evil person. He was willing to kill innocent civilians to make his point. But he said very clearly what his goal was. It was, of course, he was angry about us bombing and killing people over there. He was angry about not helping the Palestinians. And he was angry for having military bases on the religious territory of Saudi Arabia. You know, those were his justification. But his goals were, okay, we want to bankrupt America. We want to drag them into a no-win war over here, and we want the American people to get into a dispute over policy. And it looks like he hasn't done so badly, unfortunately, but we have done poorly, you know, in the fact that we fell into the trap. But it just goes on and on. But on this is pure propaganda. But what we have to refute and refuse, you know, to listen to this stuff, you know, the propaganda. And that's all we get. And it's been so much in my lifetime as I study the issue of war. I certainly was very much aware of what was happening in Vietnam. I was drafted at that time. And that was based on a lie. How many other wars have been based on lies? How many lies are being told about Ukraine right now? How many lies were told about Saddam Hussein, you know, tearing out babies from incubators and throwing them away? They were all lies and weapons of mass destruction. So it's based on lies. So we have to get people to question this stuff. And it's so sad to have one of your ulterior goals is to don't believe our government. They almost always lie to us. And that is a tragedy. They lie about war, they lie about economic policy too. You know, they give you statistics and say, oh, well, everything is okay, there's no inflation, and some of it is ignorance and some of it is just pure demagoguery and just to deceive the people and scare the people. They build up fear in foreign policy, so you'll go to war and endorse the war, and they do this economically. They did this to intimidate the members of Congress about the financial collapse, and they you know, went and started spending that money, inflating the currency. But they build up fear. Fear is one thing that is hard to, you know, compete with. But I don't think we can solve the problem unless we have enough people look at this and look at what kind of propaganda that we have to listen to and sort out the truth. Now, does that mean that it's going to be easy and all you have to do is click on the internet and you're going to get it? And that doesn't work quite that easy. But you probably have a better chance, you know, getting the full story from the internet. You have to look for that responsible source that you can trust. But the philosophy that I have, you know, talked about for so long is the philosophy that the founders of this country had a pretty darn good understanding about it. And it's a philosophy of liberty, and it's rather young. I think that the real development has been the last couple hundred years in this understanding, but it really started in 1215, you know, with the Magna Carta. I mean, the people were standing up and trying to rein in the king, but it's systematically improved over the many centuries to show that it's the individual liberty that is important, not the power of the government. It's not something that is sacred, and we have to challenge that. So this now is what has to be done. We have to challenge this whole notion that the federal government has this authority, you know, to control us. And this of course is new in a sense. Historically, it's new. But the last 100 years, there's been a lot of development and understanding of liberty, just as there's been understanding on economics. But the understanding of liberty probably had a pretty bad setback in this last 100 years. You know, if our ancestors of not too many centuries years ago had a better understanding, guess what? 1913 would have been a different year. There'd be no Fed and no IRS and no income tax. So this is a tough project for us, but it's a life and death project, and it's difficult for us to understand. But the one thing is if we give up and become despondent, nothing good will come of it. I mean, and we lose, and who knows how long this will last. It could last for many, many years, decades, that we don't see a reversal. But there's no reason why it can't be reversed if we're willing to think in terms that this issue of individual liberty, the personal liberty, and small government, and the right to get out of governments, and the right to leave, and the right to have small units, and the rights of self-determination, I think it would solve so many of our problems. The whole idea of the message of liberty, I see as something based on two basic principles. One is tolerance. You know, that you tolerate other people and what they do. As long as there's no violence and no initiation of violence and no fraud, that we have to become quite tolerant of the way people use their liberty. And there's been a lot of intolerance in this regards, and it's been around for a long time. If they don't do like you think they should, we're intolerant on our foreign policy. We want them to do exactly as we tell them. So if we're, it's the intolerance that invites people to say that, well, they won't sort out those who have money morally and immorally, and they just say people who have money have to be punished and have to be taxed. So this has to be sorted out. They have people from the left who think that they have a moral obligation to redistribute wealth. I mean, for this to work, a lot of them will have to come over, but we already have them over in many ways, because many ways the people on the left understand civil liberties and they don't like war. So what's going to be the giant leap? Just get a little bit more consistent and invite them over and show them that, that you can be more you can be tolerant on economic matters. But then there are some others who say, yeah, I believe in economic freedom, but we need to be strong and we need to throw our weight around, and we believe in Jacobinism, that you have to spread our goodness with force, and so that messes up that philosophy. At the same time, there are many who say, yeah, I believe in freedom, I believe in liberty, as long as you don't do stupid things and do things I consider immoral. Well, if you get into that, the moral approach is the morality of hurting people and using force and intimidating people. That's a moral issue, but it's not up to the government or you as a neighbor to say to your neighbor, or tell your government to say to your neighbor, well, we don't like the way you use your liberty. Your lifestyle is not what we like. You go to a church that it's not a good church and it has crazy ideas, so we want to ban that church. And you read books that aren't good books, so we want to ban those books. And then you have sexual lifestyles that we don't endorse, and you put stuff into your body and into your lungs that we think are bad for you. And therefore, we're going to have the government make you a better person. So the tolerance is a very, very important issue. But the other is understanding the non-aggressive principle. You know, and Bastiat was great in talking about this, because he made it very clear. If you understand, and most Americans still understand, most people in the world understand, that if your neighbors, and your neighbor has 3 cars and you have none, you're not expected to just go take his car. You know, that's still considered, you know, off limits. But, oh, it's okay to send the congressman to go take it for you. And that, of course, has to be rejected. So, if you accept those 2 principles, more tolerance, and a lot of people say tolerance means that you're accepting it, that you're condoning it, and that you sanction it. No, that isn't the case. Because you tolerate other people's religion doesn't mean that you sanction their religion. You have your own. But just because you allow somebody to have a lifestyle you disapprove of doesn't mean that you have to endorse it. And a lot of people don't quite understand that. They think legalizing freedom of choice is an endorsement of what people do. And there's no reason in the world why this can't bring people together. If you have people on the left and people on the right, and they want liberty for something over here, and somebody wants liberty for this over here, and there's some other disagreement, why shouldn't everybody come together for liberty to use it as they see fit if they reject the notion of using violence? So I think it's the only philosophy that will bring groups of people together and individuals together, and it could go a long way. I don't think that, especially in the last 100 years, that this has been emphasized, and I think it's so crucial that we realize that it's one unit. It is an economic liberty and personal liberty. They can't be separate. The founders had a better understanding of this, that liberty is liberty, and it's your life, and you have a right to use it as you see fit and work hard. But shouldn't you have the right to keep the fruits of your labor and not give it away to the government to be distributed? I think one of the personal goals that we all should seek is seeking the truth, and I complain about the lies that government tells. So it is important to seek the truth and try to work it out, because that's the whole story. But I've written that truth is treason in an empire of lies, you know. And how often do we hear this now? People tell the truth, and you have somebody like a whistleblower now and then who's telling us the truth, and they get punished for it. They shouldn't. They should be heroes for telling the truth. And then if we have this society which emphasizes liberty, then what should our personal goals be? I don't know what yours are going to be, but I personally think that if we're looking for excellence and virtue, this would be the opportune time in that kind of a society. Work to do whatever you can do, the best ability you have, and do it without harming other people. So you work for excellence, and you work for what you perceive as being virtuous. And this should be a pretty nice place to live in if we endorse these ideas. But if you turn over this idea of a fair economic distribution, if you turn over this idea that the government is going to dictate to us our social activities to make sure that we are a better person rather than trying to improve, see, the responsibility should fall on us individually or as parents or as friends and neighbors and churches. It's all done voluntarily. And you know, in some of this idea of how we would spread some of the good features of a free society, it should be done voluntarily. We should set the standard, and then people would want to emulate us. Do you think people around the world want to emulate us now? Because anytime we don't like what they do, we either send sanctions to punish the people, and we send bombs to kill a bunch of people, and then we kick out the leaders we don't like. And you don't persuade people that way. You do it by setting a standard, and I think we would be a lot better off. So those aren't very complicated ideas. They're pretty simple, but you have to get people to endorse them. But it isn't like you have to have a PhD in some fancy science to understand, well, don't hurt people and don't bother people just because they're acting in a way you don't agree with, and don't initiate force. And believe me, I think that is the road to peace and prosperity. And how can we have a higher goal than seeking peace and prosperity? I believe if we honored and respected and understood what the cause of liberty is all about, that we would have peace and prosperity. Thank you very much.